Long before our modern cities appeared, great civilizations flourished and then vanished, leaving behind engineering wonders, monuments, and stone-engraved star charts matched with cosmic precision. Who were these ancient builders? What were they doing? Mastery of knowledge that we yet struggle to understand. From quiet to buried cities in riddles. The ruins describe pyramids. These cultures have not just vanished, that we could be missing out on parts of human history that were never meant for us to read. Beneath the devastated pastures of southern Spain lie centuries of peace. There lies the ghost of a society that was once awash in mystery and gold power. The Greeks were amazed by the wealth of the monarchy, a location that is so lost that no one can explain where its capital was situated. This was Europe's forgotten Tartarus Golden Age empire. Rome was flourishing long before its trade with the Phoenicians captivated Greek sailors, and then it simply disappeared. No evidence, no dispute, no explanation. What authority might take away an entire historical society? Did the Tartaruses get smashed by water, or gradually absorbed? Itself an account of a kingdom that should never vanished, and its secrets may yet be hidden underground. What do you think happened to Tartaruses? Was it destroyed by a natural disaster? Was it destroyed by invaders or lost to history as a result of slow degradation? Set away your theories below in the remarks section. What do you believe happened to the once great empire that was Europe? Tartarus initially surfaced in the verdant basin of the Gualala River near the modern city of Seville, perfectly located between the Atlantic and Mediterranean. There were many natural resources in this area, including gold, silver, copper, and especially tin, which are required to produce bronze. Its richness attracted seafaring peoples, like as the Phoenicians and Greeks, who established business relationships and left behind records of an opulent and exotic realm. Customs. Tartarus was described as a huge empire by Herodotus and other Greek writers, ruled by a series of kings, chief among them Antonios, who is rumored to have governed for 80 years and survived to the remarkable age of 120. To the Greeks, Tartessos was not merely a business partner, it was a fabled location of wealth and longevity, almost too wonderful. Total. The truth, on the other hand. The archaeological record offers fascinating proof. Gold archaeological sites, jewels, and elaborate objects show a people who were skilled at dealing in religious ceremonies and metals. Artesian society had a unique culture. Melting pot. Despite its Iberian origins, it was significantly influenced by both writing and maritime trade, were mastered by the Phoenicians. This conversation gave emergence of a hybrid art style building and even a mysterious artesian script. Today, we still only have a partial understanding of this, that temples and tombs sites display complex spiritual concepts that very likely blend native animism with Phoenician deities, include Baal and Estate. Furthermore, the Phoenicians may have brought apart from commerce. Tartessians are being exposed to new technology through cosmopolitanism, religious concepts, and scripts. Thus, Tartarus became the first Western European society has truly become urbanized, but this rapid rise strangely was followed by a disappearance that occurred at about the same time, 500 BCE or thereabouts. Tartessos disappeared, not progressively faded or transformed, but progressively vanished. Then a flash. The civilization, city-states, and kings that Greek chroniclers had once admired were gone. None remained. Foreign literary allusions, no new inscriptions, and no recognizable traces of capital cities. Tartarus seems to have been entirely absorbed by the earth. This disappearance remains one of the great historical mysteries of the ancient world, with several competing theories not definitive. One theory states that a noteworthy natural event, maybe an earthquake or tsunami that hit the Iberian coast, decimated the region. Such a catastrophe may have easily destroyed the area southwest of the Iberian Peninsula due to seismic activity. Ports, low-lying settlements, and agricultural centers. This theory is more based on the fact that many artesian sites are coastal and that the archaeological evidence points to a rapid, total collapse as opposed to a slow decline. Some scholars even think about how Tartarus might have been destroyed by a flood so spectacular that it became the inspiration for other tales like the story of Atlantis. Although somewhat speculative, this idea relates to Plato's depiction of a prosperous, highly advanced society that was destroyed by a flood. Another plausible theory concerns politics and conflict, as Phoenicia's strength reduced because of pressure from the Near East. Babylonia and Assyria, its western specifically Carthaginian colonies, gained strength. Carthage became the dominant maritime force in the Western world. Mediterranean alongside it, A new order developed, one that may have learned Tartness are both a menace and a competitor. Some historians believe that Carthage may have devastated Tartnesses by either capturing its rulers or destroying its towns with force in a more nuanced manner. The city's economy and culture might have been deprived of food until Carthage simply cut Tartnesses off from its primary trade routes. It collapsed in any event. The Phoenician allies of Tartness were no longer in control, leaving the kingdom alone and vulnerable. Another argument states that Tartness didn't truly vanish as much as it vanished into other cultures over time. Its elites may have merged with neighboring Iberian tribes or kept Iberians losing their distinctiveness. Artesian cities may have been affected by the decline in international trade and the rise in local instability ignored over time. Their inhabitants were absorbed into new or remote communities. Local government officials. This would explain the scarcity of identifiable artesian ruins being found. They may have been buried beneath later towns or renovated and used for other purposes. The lack of texts or the enormous markings from this latter era can suggest a drop in literacy and aristocratic culture rather than total destruction. Perhaps the most perplexing element of the Tartnesses' mystery is that the location of its capital city has never been established. Unlike Troy or Mina, Tartness is an urban center that is clearly defined. Numerous archaeological digs have revealed viable possibilities, such as the site at Il Caramolo, where a cache of there is controversy despite the fact that gold jewelry was discovered in 1958. Some individuals suggest the capital is either under the existing civil rules or was washed away by ancient rivers. Others believe it may be concealed by silt in Donna National Park. But despite satellite research, ground-penetrating radar, and contemporary technologies, lost city of Tartness has only been discovered in its fragments, tombs, and riches. The absence of real cities contributes to Tartness' legendary. Field reports from other countries confirm its culture, which is backed by mysterious artifacts. But without the urban presence that most ancient nations possess, the tale of Tartness continues to haunt scholars and storytellers. About 500 BCE, it suddenly stopped talking. Among prehistoric Europe's most serious cultural extinctions in the past, a society that traded with Phoenicia accepted Greek-made riches in metal and could have caused the story of Atlanta to vanish without a trace is both intriguing and confusing. Currently, gold artifacts with intricate patterns engraved on stone slabs that have undetermined and archaic symbols. A world once brimming with ceremony and life is revealed by tombs. Tartness was a bridge east-west myth and memory in bronze and iron, and perhaps buried beneath the marshes of southwest Spain. Its greatest secrets are still to be solved under the dry sands of the northern Peruvian coast, tucked away amidst peaceful pyramids with shimmering gold fragments lost to the passage of time. There is a society so advanced that seemed nearly unreal, yet history has essentially forgotten it. Ceremonial masks were created using mastered metallurgy skills, buried their leaders like gods, and produced pure gold that still astonished the modern world for long years. The Sikh and was frequently referred to as Saipan produced an affluent, mysterious culture full of religious symbols. However, they left no written word, no epic tales, and no identities behind. There were no myths identified. All that remains are unsolved questions and gold bones. Answer: they were famously skilled goldsmiths, but no one knows who they are. Well, what do you think really happened to them? Why would a community, when someone has the intelligence to turn wealth into art, is there not a single written word left? Leave your thoughts or conjectures in the space provided for comments below. I would like to know what you think. One of the most amazing, the nearly total obsession with metal is one aspect of Sikh culture, especially gold. They were not merely skilled craftspeople, they were experts metallurgists, using techniques that were well ahead of the curve. The sarkhan might hollow mold that are cast and then carefully welded at high temperatures. These were even used in the early methods for electrolytic gilding to create strong, very thin coats of gold. This achievement is rare in other ancient cultures. Alloys like tumbaga, a combination of gold and copper, was used with great versatility to make objects with distinctive color, longevity, and meaning. However, this is far more remarkable than their skills to rather than being a symbol of prosperity. The Sikkim gold represented faith, immortality. They didn't deal in gold or hoard it. Instead, it represented the sun, the gods, and the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. Solid golderary masks, crowns embellished with celestial birds, and enormous silver earrings and ceremonial cups adorned with pictures of heaven were all buried. Includes mud brick pyramids that housed the region's highest leaders in addition to its ritual role. Each object served as a visual language, a substitute for writing, recounting stories of fortitude, religion, and philosophy that the Psyche never recorded orally. In 1987, archaeology was upended when Peruvian archaeologist Walter Alva found an entire royal tomb. Something long it was considered impossible after thousands of years. It was the burial of Elsnor Deepin, was a prominent figure in Psyche civilization below the surface. The burial over 600 precious antiquities, such as gold, silver, and copper to rare feathers and seashells, all of which are arranged in a unique and intricate ceremonial fashion never seen in the Americas before. Two people accompanied the emperor's remains: a baby, a fighter, a woman who may have been a priestess or wife, servants, and a llama. They were all buried with him to serve in the afterlife. The things discovered were significant not only for their material value but also for their deep symbolic meaning: a robust golderary mask, massive ritual earrings, gem-encrusted jewelry, and a silver-tipped the Psyche god. A celestial visage surrounded by birds was depicted on each spear wings, beams of light, water, and symbols of the sky. These indicators revealed a profound, intricate, ceremonial religious system, but there was not a single stone, glyph, word, or letter statues that reveal the identity of this man, his governing style, or the actual character of his people. Idea. One of the greatest and most puzzling mysteries of Psyche civilization is its complete silence they left following centuries of thriving development. The Psyche created a civilization that was extremely hierarchical, carried out intricate religious rituals, discovered adobe pyramids and temples, and buried their rulers with hundreds of finely crafted objects scattered across Peru's northern coast. They did not, however, leave behind any writing system, no alphabet, no formal documents, and symbols inscribed on stone, and not a single myth was preserved. Recorded. The recurrence of archaeological relics is the foundation for our current understanding of them. Interpretations and symbolic components by modern academics. This leads to an enormous gap in our understanding of their true nature. They are known as secant. The modern name for archaeologists comes from the region where many of them were found dead, but no one knows their real name or the language they spoke, what they believed to be the universe, the sun, or death, or what stories could have been transmitted across the ages. Even while civilizations like the Maya Egyptians and the Chinese left behind massive when it comes to textual compilations that aid in our understanding of their social and spiritual spheres, the Psyche are like gold ghosts, glistening but silent. They lived in a culture that reached the highest levels of artistic and spiritual sophistication, but their real identity is completely buried. No identities, no voices, and no lasting memories over time. Without a system of writing, the Psyche developed an extraordinarily complex visual language of symbols to express their worldview and religious convictions. Funerary masks were created in a variety of ways based on social placement of the departed that symbolizes solar, oceanic, reincarnative, or heavenly power spirits on ceremonial dishes and items. Researchers have found repeating patterns, motifs such as celestial birds, deep-sea creatures, arms, and the sun moving through water touching the sky with one's hand. When combined, they produce a mythology that is represented visually rather than using words, but no one truly understands what the indications. Did they believe that water or the sun was the cause of soul rebirth, a gateway to the world of God? Because of the Psyche, everything is still in the air, left no voice or explanation for the following generation. Roughly the 12th to the 13th century saw the swift and unceremonial fall of the Psyche civilization. Their adobe pyramids were abandoned, incomplete royal tombs, and their symbolic religious rituals gradually disappeared. Some scholars claim that severe drought, internal conflict, or deep it's possible that spiritual discontent caused the civilization to fall apart from within. Then, the Incas and Chime took control of the region. But Psyche spirit did not stay for a longer time. The artisans who once worked with metal to make religious symbols, who buried their kings like gods and built temples in the desert with their bare hands, vanished into thin air. A nickname. There are no written records, no oral traditions that have been transmitted, and no known descendants who now call themselves Psyche. They were merely a society. There was an endless silence, something covered in sand, and that once shined magnificently, and the Psyche culture may be more fascinating than any other ancient culture because of this. They are not like Egypt, China, or the legendary Atlantis, where we have deep text files. The Psyche are real. You are welcome to stroll and handle their antiquities, even open their tombs, visit their temples, and remain uninformed about who they really are. They have no name, no voice, are dead, forgotten gods, and never to be heard again. A civilization devoid of strife, without monarchs, lacking any signs of power, but they built cities via urban planning more advanced than many of the modern ones. Not Egypt, not Mesopotamia, but a completely different universe, one that was almost 4,000 years old and then vanished as if it had never been there. This was the Indus Valley Civilization. Also known as the Harappa civilization, is one of the most significant and perplexing mysteries in human history, previous besides being among the first three centers of civilization. But it also stunned the world with its astounding advancements in engineering, city planning, and cleanliness. With little no indication of power or hostility around 3,300 to 300 BCE, they built towns like Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Deliverah, and Lethal, which had hundreds of inhabitants, thousands of people in a universe where every street has a precise grid. Each household had its own water supply, and society seemed to function well without the need for violent or religious confrontation. Order. Then the whole civilization disappeared without a trace. No fighting, no destruction, just a strange quietness. Total quiet. Why did such a highly evolved society vanish without a sign? What happened to them, really? And could it be a cautionary tale for today? The story of the Indus Valley Civilization begins here. What are your true thoughts? What happened to the Indus Valley Civilization? Was it flooding or changing drought? The river that carried them down? Or may there be another reason, one that history books have never mentioned? Share your thoughts or theories in the space provided for comments below. Who knows? You might be the next clue in this enigma that has endured for millennia. Will be discovered by the years. The urbanization of the Indus Valley Civilization was one of its most prominent characteristics, preparing thousands of years beforehand. The industrial cities weren't random collections of residences. They were the result of an extremely intricate master plan, streets with a precise grid that are divided and intersect at right angles. Separate functional areas, from business and residential areas to administrative or public centers. Their filth is the most startling thing, and compared to many medieval ones, public sanitary facilities were more advanced. European cities' drainage pipes were constructed beneath the main streets. Home wastewater transportation outside of the city using a closed-loop system that was quite innovative and successful. Better yet, most houses had private bathrooms, and wells and water filtration systems were widely distributed, indicating a culture that placed a high value on individual cleanliness and quality of life. Bricks used in construction were made with a uniform 1:4 ratio, a level of precision that is challenging to accept for an ancient society. This suggests that they employed a uniform system of measuring, highly developed technical skills, and the capacity for mass production, as opposed to in most other ancient civilizations. There were signs of violence, struggle, and conquest are regarded as inevitable. The society of the Indus appears to have been exceptionally peaceful even now. Archaeologists have not found any indications of large military structures or weapons in their ruined monuments of might, massive altars toward deities, and stunning royal graves. Everything points to a stable, tranquil, and roughly equal society. Daily life is given precedence over displays in their architectural relics of power or mandated religious control. Even their little seals and carved tablets, including commercial representations of non-aggressive animals. Instead, they place more emphasis on symbolism and business as a result. Several scholars have. I'm curious, was this a society that evolved without resorting to war? However, even if the Indus script's yet unclear, the items found range from beautifully crafted ceramics, and they show a vibrant cultural and commercial life. From jewelry to precise measuring tools, archaeological discoveries indicate that the Indus culture possessed a hug e-commerce network with Mesopotamia, Central Asia, and coastal portions of the Arabian Peninsula. They had seaports, commerce ships, and a variety of products, such as metals, semi-precious stones, grains, and textiles. In other locations, like Lethal, There was actual proof of this in the form of old dockyards and canal networks. They were largely reliant on agriculture and had a strong maritime economic mindset. Perhaps what the reason the Indus Valley culture is so unsettling and difficult to understand is not what they built, but how they vanished without a trace. Suddenly and quietly, a violent or grisly collapse between 1900 and 1300 BCE. There was a prosperous time cities such as Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and Dalera began to rapidly decline. Construction projects came to a halt, trade declined, and eventually the entire society withered away, seemed to vanish from the map of the past. No signs of an outside invasion are present. There are no signs of war crimes or widespread destruction akin to that usually seen when other ancient civilizations fall. There are no visible remains, and the settlements of the Indies were not destroyed by fire, last-ditch defenses, or desperate warfare. They were simply abandoned, as if they're the residents eventually departed in silence. Researchers have proposed there are several explanations for this strange fall: changes in climate and disappearance rivers. One of the most often cited explanations is long-term climate change, which has led to a sharp decline in the available water supply, specifically the Gaga-Hakra River, which is revered by some as the Sarasota of ancient texts, that either vanished or changed course due to tectonic movement. For a society that relies so heavily on irrigation and farming, the loss of water rendered their cities uninhabitable. Instability of the ecosystem and frequent flooding. Mohenjo-daro, one of India's largest cities, possesses important archaeological indications of multiple floods, with silt accumulations on top of one another. These frequent floods not only damage infrastructure, but also most likely made them exhausted, impairing their determination and ability to decentralized administration, internal decay, and rehabilitation. The absence of monarchs or separate ruling class, which would have been useful in times of peace, might have developed into a significant shortcoming during a significant emergency. Without it, possible that civilization would not have been able to effectively handle environmental, economic, and or the effects of migration. Slow movement to the east, creating opportunities for it, was the bad civilization, according to some scholars. Instead of dramatically collapsing, the Indi retreated in a methodical manner. They gradually abandoned their cities, leaving behind the Indus River, and proceeded to the eastern Ganges plains, where the air was more stable. These migrating populations may have ultimately laid the groundwork for the post-Indus Vedic society, because there are no overt indications of conflict or catastrophic events. The decline of the Indus Valley civilization has often been defined as the silent death of a great civilization, one that had achieved amazing advancements in society and technology, but ultimately failed to overcome the inherent fragility of the social structure and the forces of nature. Today, all that remains of the Indus civilization are artisan tools, drainage systems, burned bricks, and trade seals are still being found and looked into. Furthermore, even though we haven't fully understand them, the modern world continues to be amazed by their precise logic and the ability to organize a peaceful, successful community. The Indus serve to remind us civilization does not require conquest, and progress can be founded on harmony with nature, order, and cooperation. And that if they don't, even the most advanced society can collapse. Adapt to environmental changes. Long before the Egyptian pyramids and the first Chinese dynasty, there was a strong civilization, a place where people first went to write down their thoughts, a place where from the ashes, the first actual cities emerged, a place where astronomy, law, mathematics, and mythology developed as a result of the deeds of people who lived more than 5,000 years ago. It was not a myth, it was genuine. It was called Sumer, located in Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and the Euphrates and Sumerian rivers, were abandoned by Sumer, the first civilization in human history to do so. Concealed behind written materials, they built elaborate cities, put up enormous ziggurats that generated writing, flew to the sky to preserve their entire universe. Then, as if they had vanished from the face of the earth, they suddenly vanished without a farewell. No final known battle, no great final battle. Crumble, revealing silent clay tablets that have been buried for millennia. How could such a primitive society, which acted as the prototype for all later societies, simply disappear without anyone observing? Archaeology is not the only answer to this question. This is one of the greatest mysteries in human history. What about you? What are you of the opinion that the Sumerians did indeed die? Were they wiped out by war? Or was it a sickness caused by drought? Unrecorded catastrophe? Or maybe they were never truly gone. Drop into the space provided below with your hypothesis. Every perspective matters, who knows? Maybe the missing piece of a 5,000-year-old riddle is in your possession. Over 5,000 years, roughly 3,200 BCE, when most people were still living on the move, or one of the greatest advances in human history was made by the Sumerians, who practiced rudimentary farming. They devised the cuneiform system, which is a collection of wedge-shaped symbols pressed together, applying styluses to tablets of clay. Initially, it was a simple tool to business transactions and document offerings to temples. However, from this helpful initially, Sumerian writing quickly evolved into a complete written language capable of preserving laws, literature, mythology, and astronomy. One of the most important books still in existence, the Epic of Gilgamesh, is a captivating story of a king's quest for immortality that captures the deep intellectual and spiritual concepts of Sumerians' writings. Evolution went beyond a straightforward technical breakthrough. It signaled the start of the day and the division between the past and the present, of a period when individuals could communicate concepts, remember information, and create civilization through written records. Unlike the concentrated empires, Sumer, which emerged later, was a network of independent city-states, comprising as Lagash and Nippur. Each city-state was an independent little universe, with its own king, patron, army, legal system, and god. Not a single central authority. Rather, these cities coexisted under a loose system of rivalry and cooperation. This was a very early but complex political system that allows for the testing of numerous governing models. Sumerian culture was clearly stratified, with levels ranging from slaves and commoners to priests and aristocrats. Most importantly, the Uranus legal code, the earliest known legal document, was written in 2100 BCE, demonstrating an acute awareness of law, order, and the authority of the state. Since the dawn of civilization, the Sumerians were among the first to study mathematics and astronomy, and they were also the first to write. They developed a base 60 number system that formed the foundation for how there are divisions for 60 seconds, 60 minutes, and 360 degrees of geometry in a circle. Today, they could measure land area, calculate volume, and use lunar cycles to generate calendars with a 12-month lunar year. By examining the heavens, they were able to predict solar eclipses, track seasonal fluctuations, and model celestial bodies. These achievements not only made agriculture possible, but also paved the path for Babylonian Greek astronomy, science, and even some aspects of modern scientific understanding. Among the spectacular structures that the Sumerians left behind is the ziggurat, the clearest illustration of religious fervor and governmental authority. These were multi-story, baked brick temple towers that climbed dozens of meters high in the heart of each city. Every ziggurat serves a distinct function. The Sumerians thought that the top of the tower was home to a certain patron deity. The ziggurat of Ur is a perfect example of a house of worship as well as a ritual and government hub for the entire city-state. The construction of such a big monument revealed their remarkable ability to plan, their architectural expertise, and, above all, their commitment to bridge heaven and earth, a place where people attempted to reach the holy with their own hands. Why the Sumerian among the most mysterious and unsettling societies in human history is not only what they built, but also how they disappeared. Circa 2000 BCE, as their urban areas were still being used, clay tablets were still being etched, and ziggurats still towered over the Mesopotamian countryside. The plains suddenly, everything stopped. There were no new buildings constructed, no records described a collapse. There were no signs of impending catastrophe, as if a whole civilization made the silent decision to forget history on that day. Archaeologists, academic historians have proposed a variety of theories to account for this unusual disappearance. Alien is one common belief. Invasion. Amorite tribe from the west and Elamites from the east rushed in, seizing city-states in Sumerian, overthrowing their rulers, and imposing new laws. But if invasion was the main reason, why didn't the Sumerians flee their homeland? Laments their passing in frantic poetry or inscriptions. Many civilizations have maintained their cultural identity in spite of being subjugated. Another theory concerns climate change. Geological evidence indicates it's possible that the drought damaged irrigation infrastructure and Stalinized farmland due to dwindling groundwater levels, which forced residents to abandon formerly thriving lands. But how could a civilization solely rely on the climate if it was the main factor? Is it possible for someone with experience managing floods to be helpless against drought? Would there have been a more terrible thing yet to be discovered? A few scholars show increasing city-state rivalries, internal conflict, and societal inequality and a loss of faith in authority may have been the main forces behind Sumerian civilization to break apart from the inside out, but archaeological excavations have revealed no overt indications of civil unrest or protracted battle. The final and most conventional wisdom now holds that the Sumerians did not truly vanish, but were adopted by later societies, especially the Babylonian and Akkadian. Ones they continued to have gods, writing systems, legal philosophy, and mythology, but Smear's name gradually faded into obscurity apparently. The fact remains accurate: no official document or regal declaration of loss, no parting word from a waning royalty, a community that led the way and left behind no written record of its extinction, despite its established history, and perhaps that is what makes Sumer one of the most serene, haunting, and enduring mysterious events throughout human history. The vast majority of what we currently know about the Sumerians comes from about 500,000 clay. Many of the tablets found in Mesopotamia remain uninterrupted for centuries. Sumer was thought to be a myth, but in the 19th century, the discovery of cone form brought in full resuscitation of a lost culture. This is the strange paradox. Though the people who invented writing and were the first to record human history have passed away, nothing to justify their own absence, no documentation of starvation, no stories of final battle, no last word from a dying ruler. It appears that one day they simply stopped writing, stopped building, and vanished. The Sumerians were among them who created human history, who instructed us in recording, building, organizing, worshipping, and calculate the globe's size. However, instead of ending suddenly, they departed the historical scene without a word. Additionally, perhaps this very silence that makes them seem legendary when someone talks ancient civilizations. The first thing that comes to mind are the towering pyramids of Egypt. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia were the lost settlements of the Indus Valley. But what if, as I indicated earlier, one of the oldest and most resilient civilizations in the globe did not appear in the Middle East or Europe, but rather in Japan? Hidden away in the serene forests and foggy coastlines of the prehistoric culture of Japan was so long-standing, resilient, and incredibly inventive that would transcend nations, change the course of history, and place everything we felt that early humanity was something we knew about. They call it German civilization. Without armies or monuments, it flourished in silence for over 10,000 years, but with fire, earth, and ceramics that have been cord-marked and continue to bear witness to a people who they had mastered living in harmony with the soil long before the plow was invented, never touched down on the ground. What do you think? Does the fact that Japan formerly had a flourishing civilization surprise you? For almost 10,000 years without war, without kings, without farming? Kindly provide your thoughts in the space provided for comments below. Do you believe that Japan was one of the major ancient civilizations? Even if they never built pyramids, let that be the case. Sink over a period of 10,000 years starting from 14,000 BCE and concluding around 300, the people of Japan lived, worked, hunted, worshipped, and established a way of life that would quietly persist outside of the pyramids of Egypt, the Mayan temples, and even the ascent of agriculture in most of the remaining parts of the planet. Most civilizations come into being and fall apart. German culture evolved over a few centuries and endured over 100 slowly, but it is incredibly steady in its continuity. This prolonged duration was not set apart by massive empires or magnificent structures. Instead, the perhaps more important evidence of a strong human connection was left by the John people: thousands of exquisitely sculpted clay pots that capture nature figures. In addition to the settlement's ruins, what makes John so amazing isn't not just how old they were, but also how well they were able to convey their culture without agriculture, metal tools, or formalized governance. Unlike many other in ancient society, the Ajman were not nomads. However, relying on, they largely subsisted on hunting, collecting, and fishing, and built permanent settlements, some of which had more than 500 pits residences. They made use of the varied ecosystems and coastal seas of Japan, full of freshwater rivers, game-rich forests, and shellfish they had plenty, which allowed them to live lazy lives. They are some of the earliest examples of domesticating animals and crops without doing so of an established, non-farming community over the centuries. Their pottery evolved from simple useful containers to exquisite works of art with elaborate patterns, ethereal themes, and striking flaring edges. Some of these pots sat 14,000 BCE. They are the oldest ceramics yet discovered, however. It was more than just utilitarian apparel. The aforementioned artifacts reveal a society that valued artistic expression and symbolic importance. Their most enigmatic creations are miniatures and clay deities with enormous traits, big eyes, and strange positions. These are commonly thought to objects used in rituals, fertility signs, or religious iconography. Their essence implies a civilization that is very symbolic, imaginative, spirituality, and ritual, far more intellectually advanced than most people would expect from a society without either writing or cities. These relics give us a window into a world that was rich in cultural richness and spirituality, yet lacking the frills of developed civilization. Archaeological sites such as Sanne Murayama in Amori Prefecture provide tangible evidence of this complexity. Large residences, ritual spaces, storage holes, and evidence of long-distance jade and obsidian trade. This was no tribe from the backcountry. Its social conventions were deeply rooted in its long-standing culture, but it is the extraordinary length of John's life that truly challenges our understanding of the community. Since the majority of cultures in the world arise quickly and disintegrate in chaos, how was it possible for non-agricultural society to endure for over 10,000 years? The answer was located in their ongoing relationship with nature. The John did not try to regulate their environment. Instead, they made adjustments to its rhythms. They built societies in peace with one another, hunted sparingly, and balanced their foraging the landscape. Using this, they created a model of human longevity that modern civilizations are rarely successful. Unlike the many ancient societies that suddenly disintegrated either to war, internal strife, or climate change, the end of civilization came slowly and quietly. Their way of life went through several phases, from early to final German, but there weren't signs of complete unconsciousness or abrupt collapse. Instead, it progressively merged with a new cultural wave that followed the Yayoi people's arrival from the Asian mainland around 300 BCE. Techniques for rice cultivation and metalworking were introduced. However, the John weren't entirely altered. Their customs, heritage, and even culture have endured. In modern Japanese people, recent genomic studies have shown that people in northern Japan, including preserved clear traces of their Jamon ancestry, as in Hokkaido, proving that this cultural transition was not an end, but a long-term, silent process. Constancy UNESCO has designated sites connected to John culture as World Heritage Sites. Historical sites and artifacts are prized not simply for their age, but for what they represent: a long-lasting, progressively changing society that left no empires behind, but instead gave the world something that might be more resilient: perseverance and the elegance of simplicity. So, did Japan really have a 10,000-year-old pottery culture? Yes, without a doubt. Furthermore, it might be one of the most incredible and underappreciated tales from human history. At a time when we judge success according to speed, growth, and domination, John reminds us of another in a slow, steady, maintained, an extremely human manner. Before the time of the philosophers and democracy, Athens was the center of a culture of imposing warrior rulers and stone fortifications, a people whose myths were etched on golden fire. This was the world of the Minions from 1600 to 00 BCE. They were in command the Greek mainland with a mix of force and sophisticated bureaucracy. Their names would live on in epic poetry, and their towns would be remembered with their scribes first wrote in Greek on the Cyclopean walls in the enigmatic Linear B symbols. They were not merely the ancestors of the Greeks, they were the first to dream of Troy, the first to develop a heroic morality, and the first to essentially vanish without a race. What do you think happened to the Minions? How could such a powerful society have does writing completely erased defended towns and warlords? Put down your theories in the space provided for comments. Was it a natural disaster, an insurrection, or a war, or anything even more mysterious? Despite their brilliance, the Minions disappeared from history in a way that still baffles scholars. These weren't outdated people. They possessed advanced metallurgy, created beautiful pottery, kept up complex governments, and managed massive palace economies using the first written version of Greek linear. Their cities were the centers for political clout, religious observance, and military power, making money through trading routes that linked them to the rest of the Mediterranean, originating from Minoan traditions. Although their own military mindset changed the unique civilization that the Medians established, but all of this fell apart. Why did a society so advanced break up so completely? How could the architects of such magnificence go, leaving behind shattered ruins and queries that have not been resolved? The mystery just adds to the fascination. Minoan cities, the affluent, were not the only inhabitants of Tehran, Pius, and Maine. They were among the most highly fortified political, religious, and military centers of the Bronze Age. Encircling these citadels whereby massive cyclopean walls made of multi-ton stones that interlocked. The Greeks believed that giants must have constructed them since they were so large without mortar. In the palaces served as both administrative hubs and symbols of the king's power. The Minoans' ruling class was buried in lavish shaft burials with golden masks, intricate jewelry, and weapons that portray a wealthy, exceedingly hierarchical society that honored its forebears with towering architecture. The Minoans were absent by itself. They were part of a vast network that connected the major civilizations of the Bronze Age. They had an impact on the Aegeans, Egypt, and the Hittite Empire, coastal regions of the Mediterranean, including the Levant. Archaeological evidence suggests that they were traders' routes, dealing in rare metals, luxury goods like ivory and porcelain, and even cultural ideas. Their relationship helped them succeed, but it also made them vulnerable to the bigger network's collapse. Perhaps most significantly, the cultural and historical underpinnings of Homer's Iliad came from Minoans, and Odyssey, Achilles, Daces, Echo, Agamemnon, Manaus, and other real Mycenaean kings and soldiers. The society they lived in, full of alliances, vendettas, and far-off wars, reflect the social structure depicted in Homeric stories. Poetry written from 1200 to 00 BCE. Something horrible occurred. The great cities of the Mycenaean civilization collapsed one after another in hostility. Theft in large cities, like Pius Tyrans and even Emsini. This emblem of supreme power bears archaeological indications of desertion and fire damage. The linear, the B writing system vanished entirely, bringing down the entire administrative structure that once supported the economy and politics. Within a few generations, Greece was incorporated into the modern Greek Empire. During the Dark Ages, there was no writing, no towering buildings, with practically all business shutting down. The most worrisome element is not just the collapse itself, but the rate at which a formerly powerful and developed society disappeared almost without explanation, leaving only the silent and unsolved questions about the ruins not answered. The fall of the Mycenaean civilization is still considered to be among the most significant the mysteries of the ancient world, a historical event that, even after moreover 3,000 years have left historians and archaeologists perplexed. Many hypotheses have been proposed to explain how a society with this level of power, structure, and influence might disappear so fast. One of the most frequently discussed is the invasion by the mysterious sea people sailors who wiped out many Eastern Mediterranean civilizations that were concurrent, like the Hittite Empire and the New Kingdom of Egypt. If Mycenaean Greece was one of their objectives, the rapid destruction of coastal cities could have triggered a more widespread collapse. A different approach places more emphasis on inward dissatisfaction. Some scholars claim that growing social disparity, in which the ruling class accumulated excessive wealth and power, which led to widespread unhappiness, rebellions, or even internal aristocratic family takeovers, in a society that relied primarily on power centralized within the palace. And any disruption to the central system could have resulted in the building's collapse to take apart. Natural calamities and climate change must also be considered. Greece is traversed by major fault lines, and archaeological sites show significant earthquakes that took place during this period. At the same time, geological studies and pollen analysis indicate as prolonged drought may have led to widespread agricultural collapse around 1200 BCE. Hunger, in addition to social discontent. Finally, some academics believe that the Mycenaean collapse in the late Bronze Age due to a more significant systemic issue, as interconnected civilizations throughout the region were linked by trade, politics, and technology. The breakdown of even single link, such as the disruption of tin supplies required for bronze production, could have caused a domino effect. This viewpoint holds that Minoan Greece was neither the only one victim, but a piece of a larger, interconnected universe. In the process of disintegrating, current scientific new discoveries are shedding further light on the Mycenaean civilization's downfall. Pollen analysis from antiquity indicates a sharp decline in agricultural activity around 1200 BCE, clear-cut indications of a protracted drought. In the meantime, isotopic evaluations of human remains exhibit changes in diet and mobility, suggesting the existence of migration due to famine or social instability. No single component alone could have destroyed an entire civilization, but when environmental, social, and economic crises happen simultaneously, they can produce a perfect storm powerful enough to wipe out a once great world. Despite a few small communities survive the destruction, oral traditions that have been preserved memories of the Minoans. These ultimately evolved into the stories that Homer would later record. But Greece was in decline for a long time. The loss of substantial architecture, literature, and international engagement led to a profound cultural silence continued until the 8th century BCE, when the Greek alphabet was introduced. And the fall of Minoan civilization wasn't the end when cops began to show up of a system of government. It was the breakdown of an entire system of knowledge, power, and memory, but it planted the seeds for a later rebirth. Ironically, the heroes of Homer became models of the Greek qualities of fortitude, dignity, and tragedy. Even now, the fall of Mycenae serves as a powerful reminder civilizations. They are vulnerable to a crisis convergence regardless of how far ahead they are. Natural, social, and political. What if you were a resident of a small hamlet and one day the entire community not just gathers to set fire to their property for the disagreement rather than a natural disaster, own homes not once, but every few generations, like a sacred ritual sounds, although it felt like a brutal rite or a scene from science fiction. This was the strange reality of a very real civilization. The Cucuteni Trialia flourished in what is now Romania over 7,000 years ago. Moldova. In Ukraine, they didn't build pyramids, conserve ancient texts, or construct mysterious monuments. They left scorched, red ashes in their wake, bricks and clay layers that have been scorched by intense fires. Unquestionable evidence that they intentionally burned their entire settlements on several occasions, not due to disaster, not an invasion, but rather because they methodically, both cyclically and ritually, and that is currently one of the most significant archaeological mysteries in Europe. Why do you think this is what they did? What if it wasn't a catastrophe or war? Have sparked an ongoing pattern when a village burns down its own houses? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Was it a ritual of rebirth, an ancient religious tradition, or something far more than we can now envision? When discussing the Neolithic and early Lacolithic periods, few would have predicted that a European civilization with such amazing urban the Cucuteni Trialia had scale in the past. Absolutely not, or rather of a scattered collection of small settlements. The Trialia people built massive communities arranged in concentric circles, circular patterns that were exclusive to Europe in the prehistoric era, some of these areas spanning 400 hectares and housing up to 3,000 distinct dwellings, the size of an ancient city that could accommodate 10,000 to 15,000 people. These numbers are remarkable, even when contrasted with data from the same time period. Civilizations such as early Egypt or Sumer, how these are arranged in space settlements, were quite careful. They arranged the dwellings in circles, establishing separate radial paths that most likely converge inward to an open central area used for ceremonial occasions or group gatherings. Despite the fact that they had no written language, its architectural layout reveals a rather advanced urban mindset deeply embedded in the communal structure and ceremonial life. As a result, modern archaeologists consider these sites to be more than merely villages. They might be the first European precocities. Emerging classical cities existed in Greece and Rome thousands of years ago. One of the strangest riddles archaeologists have found among the remains of Cucuteni Trialia is the ubiquitous evidence of communities that have burnt out, not just a few occasional homes, while hundreds of houses and whole villages were immediately burned, leaving thick layers of the excavation sites were littered with ash, burnt red clay, and carbonized wood because there are no signs of conflict, no weapons, no fortifications, no mass graves, no signs of terrible combat. The explanation for why this is even more oddly, it appears to have happened cyclically. Around every 60 to 80 years, every few generations, the hamlet's residents would deliberately burn it down and then rebuild directly on top of the ashes. This was neither rushed nor the result of disaster. All the signs point to a methodical, carefully thought-out process that has been used for a very long time. What could compel an entire society to destroy the place over and over again? Were they able to survive? That question, which is almost ritualistic, still has no definitive answer. Among the many theories have been proposed to explain the strange behavior of the Cucutini-Trilia people. The most generally accepted theory states that destroying their homes was a recurring religious celebration. Early agricultural societies did not consider fire to be only an instrument. It was a highly regarded symbol of rebirth, cleansing, and the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The residents of Trilia might have believed fire was eventually used to clean their living space from the ashes. A fresher, more pure life could arise. It appeared to be a cosmic rebirth rite in which the new must be created by destroying the old. Other scholars have proposed several interpretations. The custom of burning dwellings could have been associated with significant spiritual turning periods, or elders passing all throughout the community. Every generation may have destroyed the relics of the past as a demonstrate their reverence for their ancestors by considering historic houses as sacred spaces rather than some place to call home. Altered via the ritual of fire as cyclical rites, social rites, or symbol or the belief of an ancestor. All signs point to the Trilia being to rebuild life, not to ruin it. They set fire to their homes. What's notably, burning dwellings wasn't merely a symbolic or ceremonial act. Furthermore, it inadvertently became an excellent instrument for archaeological preservation when the Caratine Trilia homes were set on fire, exposing the clay walls to intense heat and hardened, turning into a primitive form of charred brick. Consequently, many of the items inside, including as ceramics, jewels, fertility figurines, and tools, were preserved almost intact for almost 7,000 years rather than decomposing over time. This is now referred to as inadvertent preservation by archaeologists' effect because these repeated burnings have formed a vivid recreation of the substance. Societal norms and values that are not recorded in writing in lost past has emerged more clearly from the ashes and scorched brickwork than it was impossible to predict. Unlike numerous other historical societies, Cucutini-Trilia did not build any fortifications, had no military equipment, and left no evidence of extensive hostility. Basic farming tools, stone knives, and ceramics, no signs of oppressive armies or ruling classes. This has led to, according to several anthropologists, this society may have been peaceful, one where power was distributed, decentralized, and women played significant roles, as seen by the significance of fertility in communal life. Collaboration and peace were more common than confrontation. The Cucutini-Trilia civilization lasted for almost 2,000 years before going extinct approximately 2,700 BCE in a way that is both silent and confusing. Completely out of history, there are no symptoms of an illness, no signs of hostilities, and no record of an invasion. It appeared as if they had simply disappeared, leaving behind nothing but charred ashes, bricks, and unfinished artifacts. Many theories have been proposed. Some climate change may have played a role. According to scientists, prolonged drought and resource depletion may have rendered their large-scale settlement model untenable. Others point to pressure from Indo-European nomadic tribes who brought a warrior-based lifestyle and significantly unique social structure that may lead to conflict or displacement. Moreover, there exist conjectures suggesting that their ritualistic, non-hierarchical society may have evolved into too rigid to adapt to the rapid changes in the environment and population dynamics. Whatever the reason, their death remains one of the most important prehistoric archaeological mysteries in Europe. Cucutini-Trilia left no stone inscriptions or old texts, but rather the result of fire, ash, and hardened clay over thousands of years. Small but important items, they were inhabitants of large, orderly towns, produced beautiful ceramics, revered fertility gods, and, most mysterious of all, believed that in order to survive, everything had to be burned down at times. Perhaps to them, fire wasn't just destruction but a venerated symbol of transformation, rebirth, and a new